Okay, hello. Welcome. If you are unfamiliar with me, my name is Brianna McWilliam, and I am an author, educator, Reiki practitioner, and licensed creative arts therapist, and I've been in the field for over 12 years. And I have a particular interest in working with attachment in adulthood. I have published in the area. And I have a YouTube following and also a private practice in which I explore these things specifically through a mindfulness-based and spiritually based approach through creative arts therapies. So one of the things that I've been noticing in the comments of the videos that I've been creating are some questions that are coming up around closure. So one of the questions that came up in the last video I did was, how do you accomplish a sense of closure when your partner won't speak to you? How do you move on if you feel the relationship ended due to past baggage, but maybe not a lack of love? Okay. So these are some questions that I felt kind of in terms of what closure may be and or mean to you. And so whether it is either unhealthy to be in contact with someone again, or maybe there's a partner who just won't give you the sense of closure that you need, it can be difficult to move on with a positive attitude about love if you feel like you have unfinished business, right? So it's really good, obviously, to be able to come to a place of peace and acceptance with your partners either during the breakup or right after, but it's just not always possible, right? And so one thing I want to emphasize, however, is that in either case, whether it was rocky or it was a relatively amicable breakup, the work of closure in either case is still going to be your work to do. Okay. And so I believe that there are actually 3 steps to this process. And so the first step has to do with generalizing your feelings and your thoughts about them and the relationship. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. The second one is that you have to realize that you already know everything you need to know to move on, just based on where you are. Okay. And then the third thing is that forgiveness is an action first. The feeling of forgiveness follows. And also, I think we need to clarify whose responsibility it is to forgive, okay, whose job that actually is, and what it is that we are actually forgiving, okay? So first, let's talk a little bit about generalizing your feelings and your thoughts about the breakup, your partner, and why it is that you feel like you don't have any closure, okay? So first thing is that when we are preoccupied with a past relationship and we're struggling to let go of it, it's likely because you probably have some feelings that this is the only person that you could ever possibly have these feelings for, right? There's something just uniquely special about them, and love is just so rare and precious, and I'll never find anyone else like this ever again, that makes me feel so stimulated and excited all the time. And we think that even if we know the relationship wasn't everything it was cracked up to be, and you probably know that by now, because if you're struggling with closure, it ended. It ended in not an amicable way, because you're looking for some kind of closure, okay? Now, most people who want a relationship, however, they tend to believe that even a mediocre relationship is better than no relationship at all. But I have to tell you, I don't really agree with that, okay? If you are in touch with yourself, you're capable of making discerning decisions independent of a fear of rejection or ending up alone about whether or not a partnership truly has intimate and or long-term potential, if that's what you want, okay? Now, I believe that with each relationship, your desires can become increasingly refined. And so your decisions are increasingly discerning and exacting. Maybe you're calling it picky, but you know what? That's good, because it actually reduces your tolerance for putting up with things that you don't want. So you stop turning towards things that you don't want and you know, forcing yourself to stay in situations that don't actually fulfill the things that you desire. And so part of the work is actually divorcing yourself from this idea that love is rare and hard for you to find, okay? And the quickest way to do that is actually to find the next lighter feeling thought that offers some relief from these beliefs that you have, okay? And so relief comes from thinking thoughts that bring you into a greater alignment with your own source energy, your essential self, your spirit, whatever you want to call it. And so generalizing your feelings and your thoughts about them is actually one way to do this. So if you're preoccupied with the idea that you need someone else's input to feel closure within your own experience for what has already happened, rather than directing your thoughts towards what the other person's desires might have been and how you might have fulfilled them or not, try focusing instead on what you want right now, in this moment, moving forward, okay? Not something from them specifically, but in your experience of relationships and of what you want from a love partner in general, okay? So first, let's do this as an exercise. So the first thing you want to do is express your feelings as you are having them right now. So it might go something like, I'm shocked and I feel like the rug has been pulled out from underneath me. I feel so led on and I can't understand why they would say that they cared for me but then act this way. I'm so depressed and upset with the way things have turned out. Okay, so that's like where you might be in the moment. So let's say from that place, we want to try to reach for the lighter feeling thoughts. So we might say something like, I'm never going to allow this to happen again. I deserve better than this. And you know what? I'm glad it ended because clearly they were not who they claimed to be. Okay. Now these feelings are still negative, but they're more angry and they're less helpless. Okay. And anger is a better feeling to have because it motivates. It allows for a sense of personal agency and empowerment. Okay. There's also an acknowledgement in that the relationship was not actually a good fit. Okay. Now, over time, as the 4 emotions of a breakup move through you, and we talked about that in our, not our last live stream, but the one before, remember? And that is anger, fear, sadness, and grief. With adequate body activation, you'll be able to better find more relieving thoughts. Okay, so let's just follow this through. So we go from having the sort of less helpless, more angry feeling, which allows us to have a sense of personal power and agency again. But now let's continue on that track. So let's say, clearly we're not right for each other. This was a clarifying situation for me. I've learned so much in a short time. Thinking back, I might have been able to admit to myself that I saw it coming. I kind of sensed this might be coming. But maybe I can be grateful for this happening now rather than later. Finding out what I really want. This is actually highlighting for me what I really want, and that can't really be a bad thing. In fact, this relationship has helped me more clearly define who I am and what I'm looking for, right? And maybe I'm going to take my time moving forward because there's no urgency in figuring this out right now. I don't have to put all this pressure on myself to figure it out right now, okay? And it might actually be good for me to have some breathing space and to move into and lean into these feelings, okay? And in a strange way, maybe that allows me to look forward to what's coming next. Because whatever comes next, whatever it is, it's going to have to be better than this. Because I know myself so much better than I did then. Right? So that's one way that we can use generalizing your feelings to help you step into a place of whatever you may feel offers or affords a better sense of closure. Okay. Now, the second thing is that you already know everything that you need to know to move on. And so I want to point out that sometimes we tell ourselves that we're seeking closure, but we're actually looking for a way to reconnect. Okay, so we hope to keep certain cords or ties open because we actually truly fear letting them go. And if that's the case, and closure, let's say a closure conversation goes well, you think you got what you wanted and needed, what happens is soon after, a couple weeks later or a month later, you start questioning, well, why did that end in the first place? We had such a nice conversation. And then you start fantasizing about the rekindling of that romance. Right? So it's not actually about closure. It's actually looking for a way to reconnect. Now, when we struggle to find closure or we have what we might call unfinished business, we tend to hold a belief that this, as I said before, is the only person that we could possibly be attracted or attached to, right? And so we think, therefore, that is the only person that could ever offer me a sense of relief and release from this relationship. But the thing is, that attitude and that perception is probably a function of the same mechanism that made an amicable end impossible, right? No one else can organize your mental, emotional, and spiritual self for you. Yes, sometimes other perspectives and new information can assist in insight and clarity, but the work of closure is always going to be yours alone, especially if the task is one of willful separation. Okay? So if you struggle to move on, it's because you may be getting caught up in ideas of rightness or wrongness. So you want to know what your score was. What was my score at the end of that relationship? How much am I allowed to forgive myself for? How much do I have to forgive that person for? Right? Or maybe you feel preoccupied by guilt and like you are at fault. Whether it's wanting someone else to own their reactions and take on a certain blame for what they did, or whether it is that you want to feel like you've rectified your own wrongdoings. Okay? So closure requires that you recognize someone for being what I'm going to call a point of contrast, or what you might think of as like a road sign for pointing you in the right direction, and not getting hung up on trying to turn that person into your destination. They're just meant to be a road sign. Stop trying to make them into your destination, okay? And so if it has come to pass that the relationship has ended for whatever reason, that is all the information that you need to know to move on, okay? And so a few questions to ask yourself for finding direction in accomplishing this closure that you need for yourself might be, what does closure mean for me anyway? What does that word even mean? How do you define it? What could a partner possibly give you that would afford you that sense of closure? How can you then give that to yourself? Okay. Are you really looking for closure, or am I really looking to reconnect? Okay. What do I believe about myself and my romantic story that limits the possibilities for me if I cannot get what I think I need from this person? How might these beliefs relate to the problems I experienced in the relationship itself? Okay. Now, I would add that these are really good questions for a partner that is purposefully withholding or avoiding closure as well. Okay. And this is the last one, which is that I believe forgiveness is an action and the feelings follow. So forgiveness, I would say, is perhaps a really misunderstood concept. A lot of people associate the word forgive with the word condone, okay? But to forgive means that you stop feeling resentment, okay? To condone means that you are treating something as if it is trivial or unimportant, okay? Like you're condoning it. But if we were to treat these two concepts as synonymous, any resentments over past events would actually limit or restrict your ability to further participate in life anymore, right? And so any reminder of someone or a particular event would stimulate these painful feelings, and you'd be reliving all the unfinished emotions that are attached to it. Okay, so they're not synonymous. Forgiveness and condoning something are not synonymous, okay? Successfully accomplishing closure really requires that you allow for a completion of painful feelings, not the regurgitating of them all the time, okay? Now, I don't believe that it is necessary for you to forgive an abuser or a perpetrator in order to receive some kind of closure, for example. In this case, I actually think that blame could be useful in that it could protect you from taking on too much of what was actually not your responsibility. But ultimately, the goal will be to release that blame as well and to forgive yourself for whatever you may have taken in as a result of that maltreatment. So for whatever structures or self-blame and criticism you have adopted from your perpetrators. Okay, so for example, if we have a partner that, let's say, creates unnecessary distance or is overly intrusive and controlling, it's most likely because they have some kind of insecurity around those dimensions within themselves, and that is playing out within their own inner psychodrama, right? But if we then take that, like their shit in, right, and assume someone else's behavior must be a reaction to something I'm doing wrong, right? Then what happens is the work of forgiveness and closure will then be to forgive yourself for having perpetuated that toxic situation in your own internal psychic space. Okay. So if you've had a partner that is always putting you down, and then you enter into another situation and continue to put yourself down, it's not that partner you have to forgive. It's yourself for adopting that pattern of self-blame that wasn't yours to begin with. Okay. So in the context of a breakup where closure appears difficult to accomplish, you really can't rely on someone else to take back what belongs to them. You have to assume your own authority in parceling out what belongs to you and what belongs to them, like letting drop what isn't yours, okay? And forgiving what you need to for yourself, because that's your inner space. That's your quality of life. That's your spirit. That's your love story, okay? So I want to just make mention here, James and Friedman, they're creators of the Grief Institute. They say that you cannot forgive until you do it. Which means that until you make a statement or you set the intention to forgive and you commit to that intention, okay, it's really hard to conjure feelings for it. But conjuring that forgiveness is always something that's going to benefit you. So in the context of a relationship, offering an unsolicited statement of forgiveness almost always is perceived as a criticism or an attack. So no offering unsolicited forgiveness, okay? And when you ask for forgiveness, this is also a bit of an emotional manipulation, isn't it? Because you're asking the other person to take ownership and do something for you that you need to do for yourself. So what you're really trying to do when you ask for forgiveness is you're trying to apologize, okay? So don't try, do it. Apologize. Don't ask for forgiveness because that's your job. So apologize and you sit with that feeling. That's taking ownership. Okay? So I hope that you have enjoyed this brief live stream. And just as a reminder, we are going to be doing a 5 days to ignite your love light challenge at the end of this month. There is still time to sign up for it. And there is a link in the caption of this video. I hope to see you there. And if you've liked this video, please post some comments below. I always gain a lot of inspiration from all of the things that you share here, and hopefully can create some more amazing live stream video content based on that. So thank you for watching, and I look forward to your comments below.